thank you very much, and good morning, good day, good evening, good night to all of you, and thank you very much for joining me and for your interest in my topic and my work. The presentation I am going to make is based on a study of over 1,000 CEOs in mostly large corporations in 24 countries. A group of over 100 researchers from these various countries worked with us to try to understand what does successful, effective leadership mean in different countries. And CEOs are a very useful subject of study because by definition they have been successful, they have achieved the highest level of their organization, and therefore they have mostly, typically, a successful track record of leading various groups, functions, units, and organizations. So we have learned some very interesting results, and some of the results will surprise you, I can assure you of that, in terms of how do successful and also unsuccessful CEOs behave as leaders. And I'm hopeful that my presentation will share some new ideas with you, answer a few questions, and probably also raise some new questions. The way that I will make this presentation is interactive. I know we are all in different parts of the world. I am sitting in my office in Phoenix, Arizona, and we have obviously attendees from different cities, different countries, but we will use the technology to make this as much of a conversation as possible. So I'm going to start my presentation by asking you some questions and by asking you to reflect on your own leadership style. And if you have a piece of paper and a pen or pencil handy, that would be helpful. Or if you want to type a few things on your laptop or on your computer, that is fine too. But we will start my presentation by giving you an opportunity to reflect on your own leadership style. And then I will share with you what we have learned from the CEOs in different countries. So let's get started. And as Mr. Jaffrey mentioned, we will have about 20-25 minutes of question and answer time at the end of my presentation. I am certainly looking forward to that. I'm sure it will be an interesting conversation. So I would like you to reflect on this question in your own mind based on your experience. Some of you are in very senior positions, some of you are in middle positions, some of you are in upper middle positions in your own organizations and corporations. So I'm going to ask you to reflect on your leadership style in terms of some specific aspects of leadership. And every time I ask you a question, I also ask you to rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 7. 1 means you need a great deal of help, and 7 means you are a Superman or Superwoman, extremely effective in that particular dimension. And a score of 4 means you are neither very effective nor ineffective, kind of in the neutral territory. So keep these scales and numbers in mind as we go through the specific dimensions. So let's start. How, as a leader, how performance-oriented do you believe you are? And what I mean by that is, in your own mind, on a scale from 1 to 7, what is the message that you constantly share with your team? How important it is for your team, for your organization, for your group to constantly produce high results. In your hallways, in your meetings, how frequently do we hear comments about making things better, improving things, improving our results, improving our products, improving our quality, improving our customer satisfaction, improving our employees' motivation and satisfaction? So I'm going to give you a few seconds to rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 7. 7 means you are extremely effective as a performance-oriented manager, and 1 means you are extremely ineffective as a performance-oriented manager. So go ahead and reflect on your style and give yourself a score. I will be quiet for a few seconds. Okay, now let me ask you a second question. How effective are you as a visionary leader? How effective are you in your own mind in terms of thinking about the future, planning for the future, asking questions about the future, sharing ideas about the future of your organization, of your unit, of your team, of your products? How easy is it for you to help your team, your organization understand where is the organization going and why? And by organization, I mean the people, the organization that reports to you. So if you are a middle manager in a bigger organization, I am not talking about your CEO. I am talking about you helping your team, your group, your direct reports understand what is the plan, where are you going, why is that important. I will give you a few seconds to reflect on that question and give yourself a score from 1 to 7. Now let's go to the next dimension of leadership. Many of you must have heard from experts, consultants, that there is a difference between being a leader and being a manager, and that managers take care of day-to-day things, make sure activities, actions take place. Leaders think long-term, Leaders motivate, leaders engage, inspire. So my question to you is, on a scale from 1 to 7, how effective are you in managing the affairs of your group, of your unit, of your function? That's what we mean by administratively competent. Making sure that processes are in place, objectives are set, monitoring is done, and making sure that actions, decisions are implemented. Again, please rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 7. The next aspect of leadership is about decision making. How effective you are as a decisive decision maker. Conducting the analysis, conducting the interviews, the understanding, receiving the input from your team, from your direct report, having the necessary conversations. But then when it comes to making decisions, you make the decision with confidence, with urgency. So that's what we mean by being decisive. So please give yourself a score from 1 to 7. Now let's go to the next dimension of leadership. Inspirational, which means how easy it is for you, how effective you are in communicating an exciting vision, an exciting future, motivating people, engaging people, helping your team, your direct reports, develop their own motivation, become excited about what your group is all about, what your organization is trying to do. So please go ahead and rate yourself in terms of how inspirational are you in communicating with your team and others. The next question is integrity, which means you walk the talk. You practice what you preach. When you make statements to people, when you make decisions, your team believes that you are doing what you believe is in the best interest of the group or the organization. In other words, focusing on collective good and doing your best to be honest, to be trustworthy, to the point that your word means something very important to your colleagues, to your direct reports. So please go ahead and rate yourself. in terms of your how you see yourself as a high integrity leader. Finally, the last aspect of leadership that I'm interested in is how diplomatic you are, how good you are in building relations with your team, with other stakeholders, how easy it is for you to listen to other people, their ideas, their views, their interests. How easy it is for you to create agreement among people who have very different ideas. That's what we call diplomatic. So please go ahead and give yourself a score, 1 to 7. Okay, well, in a few minutes, you will find out why I have selected these 7 dimensions. But first, oh, sorry, I have one other dimension, self-sacrificial. Self-sacrificial means how willing you are to forego your own personal interest to achieve the goals of your unit, your organization. How willing you are to accept that what needs to be done to improve the organization, to achieve the goals of the organization, may require you to sacrifice a few things, including your time, including your time to do other things, including your willingness to not look for short-term gains if those gains may prevent the organization from achieving its goals. So now you have these 8 aspects of leadership that you have rated yourself on. Now I want to show you the profile of a group of CEOs that we studied. We asked them very similar questions to what we asked you in terms of performance-oriented, visionary, administratively competent, decisive, inspirational, integrity, diplomatic, and self-sacrificial. And as you can see, the average score of this group on each dimension is shown on each bar. For example, the score for the average score for this group of CEOs is 5.5 on performance orientation, 5.3 on being visionary, 5.2 on being administratively competent, 5.2 on being decisive, 5.2 on being inspirational, 5.3 on being integrity, high integrity, 5.3 on being diplomatic, and 4.9 on being self-sacrificial on a scale from 1 to 7. So again, this is the average profile of a group of CEOs. Before I tell you more about who these people are and what these scores mean, I would like you to compare your own scores with these averages. So look at your own personal scores and compare it with the average score of these people. Write down a few comments. How does your profile, your personal self-assessment profile, compare with the average profile that you see on the screen? Are you higher? Are you lower? What does that mean? Are you similar in your self-score compared to these people? I will give you a few seconds to reflect on that and make some notes. Okay, so I hope by now you have been able to do a very quick and brief assessment of yourself and do a brief comparison of your personal score against the average of the CEOs. Now let me tell you more about our findings. And by the way, if you have questions, just write them down and we will discuss them during the question and answer period. Now, to tell you more about our study, we studied, as I mentioned, over 1,000 CEOs in 24 countries. We surveyed these CEOs. We interviewed with hundreds of CEOs in this group. We also asked their direct reports, who are senior executives, SVPs, executive VPs, and VPs in their corporations, to assess the leadership styles of their CEOs. So in total, we surveyed and interviewed over 5,000 senior executives in these corporations. Our interest was to compare the superior CEOs versus the inferior CEOs. In order for us to identify who is a superior CEO and who is an inferior CEOs, we created two measures of performance of the CEO. The first measure is what we call firm competitive performance. How successful is this CEO's company in terms of its sales performance compared to its competitors, and to what extent does the company dominate its industry? These two aspects were measured in order to understand how is the firm of the CEO performing to its competitors. That mention of effectiveness of CEO was what kind of an impact does the CEO have on his or her top management team? So we measured the amount of effort, commitment, and solidarity or cohesion that the top management team of the CEO was reporting. So we asked the CEOs, direct reports, the SVPs, the executive VPs, about how effective is the team, the top management team as a whole. So two questions, one about competitive performance and the other one about the dedication of the top management team. Those are the two metrics we use to compare the top performing CEOs and the bottom performing CEOs. So of the over 1,000 CEOs, we identified 46 CEOs who were extremely successful. In other words, their firm was doing much better than its competitors, and their top management teams were highly dedicated. In contrast to that, we identified 35 CEOs who were showing very inferior performance. These were at the bottom of the measures. So the firms were doing very poorly against their competitors, and their top management teams were reporting a very low level of cohesiveness and dedication. So now we have a group of star CEOs, superior CEOs, and we have a group of inferior CEOs based on the metrics that we used. And what we wanted to know is what is the difference between the leadership styles of the superior CEOs and the leadership styles of the inferior CEOs. And that is what I'm going to show you. So the dimensions, the 8 dimensions of leadership that I just asked you to assess yourself, are what we call mission critical leadership requirements. These 8 aspects of leadership are absolutely critical for success. What we mean by that is that the average score of the star CEOs, the superior CEOs, on these 8 dimensions is very close to 6 on a 7-point scale, which means they're performing at very high levels. And not only do they have a high score, but they also, big difference with the inferior CEOs. So these 8 leadership dimensions are the dimensions that clearly distinguish between the star CEOs and what we call the dog CEOs or inferior CEOs. So now let me go back to the chart that I showed you earlier. You remember the blue bars. The blue bars are the average of the inferior CEOs in terms of these 8 dimensions. So the average score of the inferior CEOs on performance orientation was 5.5. The average score of the inferior CEOs on visionary leadership was 5.3, etc., etc. Now you see the yellow bars. The yellow bars show you the average score of the superior CEOs. So the average score for the superior CEOs on performance orientation is 6 on a 7-point scale. The average score of the superior CEOs on visionary is 6. And also you can see that there are big gaps between superior CEOs and inferior CEOs in terms of these 8 dimensions. Clearly, the superior CEOs receive much higher scores on average compared to inferior CEOs. However, what is important for you to understand from this picture is that the inferior CEOs receive relatively high scores on all of these dimensions. A score of 5.5 on performance orientation means that the inferior CEOs are doing a reasonable job. But doing a reasonable job on being visionary or being performance oriented or being administratively competent is not enough. As a senior leader, which a CEO is, if you perform over a little over 5, unfortunately, your company will not do very well. Your top management team, your own direct reports, will not do very well. In order to be a star leader, in order to be a superior leader, you need very high scores. So one important message or lesson from this picture is that most executives I work with hundreds of, most executives believe they are pretty good visionary leaders. They are pretty good managers. They are reasonably decisive. In other words, they give themselves scores between 5 and 5.5. And the message is that, or if your direct reports give you between and 5.5, a senior leader, that is not good enough. You need to work much harder. You need to do a much better job of performing these roles. There is another very important lesson from this picture. Look at the third dimension, administratively competent. What this means is when people tell you there is a difference between a leader and a manager and that leadership is more important than managership, our study shows that they are wrong. It is not, the issue is not leadership versus or against management. It is leadership and management. You cannot be an effective leader if you do not know how to manage your operations. And when you are in a leadership role, you have to play a very important role in managing the processes, the steps, the actions, the decisions, implementation. All of those are critical for you to be an effective leader. So again, it is not whether leadership is more important than management. The important thing for you to keep in mind is In order to be an effective leader, you need to be a very good manager. The two go hand in hand. Now, I'm going to give you a few seconds to reflect on this picture. If your assessment compares to your average of your CEOs, and the yellow bar, which is the average of the superior CEOs. Please take a few seconds, look at your own scores, compare it with what you see on the screen, and write down a few notes. What is your own conclusion? What is your own lesson? What does this mean to you? Okay, let me now give you more details on every one of these leadership requirements. The star CEOs, the superior CEOs, do a very good job of anticipating possible future events and prepare for them. They're not magicians. They don't have crystal balls, but they ask a lot of questions. They develop scenarios. They try to understand the forces that can impact the future. They help their team develop a clear vision of the future, a clear picture of where the organization will be in 5 years. And they take steps in terms of how to achieve that future. That's what we mean by vision. Performance leaders always speak about excellence. They set very high standards and goals. It's one of high expectations. But they also work hard themselves and constantly communicate the need for continuous improvement. I was working with a CEO myself, and he told me that he defines himself as Chief Dissatisfaction Officer, which means he wants to make sure that his organizations are not satisfied with status quo, how good things are. They want to make it even better. Decisive leaders use their intuition and insight very creatively. They are experienced people, they're smart people, and they use that experience not just of themselves, but other people, and insights of themselves and other people to make decisions. They have this ability to combine logic, analysis, and intuition. Inspirational leaders are very people, are very energetic, are enthusiastic. They're very optimistic. They constantly talk about hope, confidence, courage, and they praise people who are successful. They share important values and beliefs in the organization. Administratively competent leaders are able to establish, monitor, and manage administrative systems. They're very organized. They're very methodical. They clarify priorities. They coordinate the work of others. They explain the rules and procedures and why employees need to know the importance of rules and procedures and how to follow them. They also have high levels of integrity because they can be trusted. People believe them when they make statements and promises. They're always ethical people. As individuals, everybody understands their values and their purpose. They're also diplomatic people. Their interpersonal skills are very high. They're very good negotiators. They try to find solutions that are win-win and solutions that bring divergent views and interests together. So, and finally, self-sacrificial leaders are individuals who help everybody understand they are contributing to a bigger picture. And that means sometimes they need to sacrifice their short-term interest, their personal interest, to make sure that the group and the organization achieves its goals and its objectives. So these are the 8 aspects and dimensions of leadership. I hope that the findings are helpful to you, are informative, and at this point I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Professor Javidan. Folks, we are now open for the question and answers. If you have any questions, you could always put it in the question box, or you could raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the console, so if you click on it, you can also have an audio conversation with Dr. Javidan. So let me go towards the question box. There are a couple of questions already posted. Being the first one, Professor Javidan, self-sacrificial dimension of the CEOs comparatively is on the lower side. What could be the causes in your views, and how one should become more sacrificial?
Thank you for the question. That is a very good question. We have had conversations with executives and with CEOs about this. The important thing for everybody to keep in mind is that the people, and remember these are corporations in the business sector, typically they are ambitious people, typically they are highly motivated individuals that want to be successful as individuals. They want to receive big bonuses. That is the nature of how people work in organizations. These are not charity organizations, they're not religious organizations, these are corporations. So everybody understands that there is a strong sense of personal interest and personal ambition. There is nothing wrong with that, long as personal ambition and motivation does not prevent the organism from achieving its goals and its objectives. So self-sacrificial is a very strong requirement. That at the same time, there is a limit to how much ordinary business people are willing to forego, ignore their personal interests. As you saw from the scores, these CEOs, the successful CEOs, do show that they are willing to make decisions that may reduce their own bonus in the short term, that may make things hard for themselves in the short term. But if that is the right thing for the organization to do, they are willing to do it. So there is a realistic limit on self-sacrificial, because these are all business organizations populated by ambitious, successful, highly motivated individuals.
Well, thank you very much. We have another one from Mr. Paul Greasley. The question is, thank you for your powerful presentation, sir. How do these secrets compare to the philosophy of servant leadership?
That is a very interesting question. The essence of servant leadership is the philosophy, the value, the belief that the role of the leader is to support, to encourage, to build buy-in and ownership, and to help employees in what they are trying to do, address their concerns. So employees work hard because they are motivated themselves. They do it not because the CEO told them, not because the boss told them, but because they decided themselves that this is important for the organization to do. When we looked at the difference between the inferior CEOs and superior CEOs, one of the things that became very clear is that inferior CEOs tend to be much more autocratic, much more dictatorial, much more hierarchical than the superior CEOs. The superior CEOs, when they talk about the success of the organization, they give the credit to their executives, to their employees. They talk about how the hard work, the intelligence of everybody in the organization has produced the results. Very few of them actually take credit for themselves. And in that way, they make it very clear that it is the success of the organization belongs to everybody. And the job of the leader is to make sure that that costs in the organization. For example, as I mentioned earlier, measures of success, the dedication of the top management team. Those who have a servant type of value, who see themselves the senior teams are extremely dedicated on the organization. In other words, the success of the organization has a personal meaning to the members of the top management team.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another one. In your view, which professional field background of a CEO can help him or her to become a more effective CEO?
I want to make sure I understand the questions. So if the question is, do CEOs with marketing background or finance background or sales background or new product background, which one of them to be more successful? Is that the question?
Yes, sir. This is it.
All right. So one interesting thing about the CEOs, the superior CEOs that we study, is that they may start in new product development, they may start in engineering, but throughout their career, they develop a much broader scope of expertise and experience. They see themselves as a general manager. Doesn't matter what their background is. And because of that, they are able to connect people from different backgrounds. One CEO may be a finance expert, a former CFO, but when he or she talks with people in marketing, people in sales, he or she is able to communicate with them because they've had backgrounds. The CEO has had background in other parts of the organization. In other words, the quick answer to the question is, it is not really the functional background of the CEO. It is the range of experiences that the CEO has had in running various parts of organizations.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Javidan. That really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Jaffrey, and I want to thank you all the attendees in this conversation. My interest was to share some insights and some information, scientific information, that can help managers and leaders like the people in our audience to become more effective leaders and to do a better job as individuals, as leaders of their organizations. Because the one thing that is so critical for a leader to understand is that your impact as a leader is not limited to what you do between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. or 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. One of the unique features of leadership is the relationship that you build, or relationships that you build, with a large variety of stakeholders, including your direct reports, your peers, your own supervisors, all kinds of external stakeholders. And the leadership role is not a 9 to 5 job, because you make big impact on the people you touch. keep that in mind, you will hopefully do a better job of building that strong relationship with the people you are interacting with. And with that, I wish you best luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I really want to thank you on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, Mile, for your valuable time and very, very intriguing presentation that you've delivered today live through this platform. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you all of those who attended this webinar. We are recording it. It will be uploaded on Mile Community, so please stay tuned to webinar.ma.org. With that note, we'd like to end this webinar, so you all will be automatically dismissed out. Thank you very much. You all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you've dialed in. So, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.